A very good evening to you, and thank you so much for joining us on this edition of Spectrum Extra. We're live on Radio 1 FM 90. This being a Friday, it's a day when we focus on the major events of the week. So I have a panel of 4 people here in studio who will be looking at some of these issues. Let me introduce them. The Honorable Simon Mulongo, after a sabbatical of about 3 weeks, he's back in studio. He's a governance and security expert who served as deputy head of AMISOM, the African Union Mission in Somalia. He was a CA delegate and also served as Buvulo East Member of Parliament. Good evening, Honorable. Thank you so much for joining us.
Well, it's so wonderful to be back again and to meet my colleagues and my good friends. I hope we do enjoy the session, and good evening, our dear listeners.
Did you carry any kamalewa for us from Bugisu? This time you've been hiding in that mountainous region.
This season, and we've been busy on the ground doing some politicking and also developmental work, and so I'm very happy that I came. Indeed, I have some malewas in the car. I'll have to share some with you.
Hey, so you are now the chairman of your village?
Yes, I was elected unopposed throughout from LOC1 to the sub-county, through LOC2 to the district, unopposed. And yes, so really I'm so happy for my people.
All right. We wish you all the best going forward. Hopefully you will not see some suckers in the primaries as you vie for the parliamentary ticket. All right. Also, our second guest in studio is Mr. Joseph Ocheno. He's a UPC member. He's a pundit on governance matters. Good evening, sir. Thank you so much for joining us.
A pleasure to be here. Good evening, and delighted to be here with Mike. Mike has not been around for a long time. Your other guest, whose name we don't know yet until you pronounce. Sarah, fantastic, and of course, Sarah will be introduced. But yeah, someone is a neighbor of mine actually in the east there. But sometimes it does this Malawa thing. But how the thing transports itself into Kampala, I have no clue.
Oh, all right. Our third guest, Dr. Sarah Birete, Chief Executive Officer at the Center for Constitutional Governance, pundit on human rights and governance issues. Good evening, Dr. Sarah. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good evening, Kenneth, fellow panelists, and the listeners out there. It's glad to be back on Spectrum Extra.
What is it with the red attire?
Red is
It's the future.
color of power. It's a color of hope. Yeah, so I'm combining both. Yes.
All right. We will be keen to listen to the power that you have come with today. Last but not least, Mr. Michael Awoneka. He is a lawyer and a pundit on social and economic matters. Good evening, Mr. Awoneka. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good evening, Kenneth, and good evening, listeners. I'm happy to be actually, this is my first maiden.
Maiden appearance on Xtra.
On Spectrum Extra, so I'm happy to be joining my good friends. All of them are my friends in the various capacities. They know deep down in their hearts.
All right. I'll leave it at that. We wanted to get the relationship that we go with on the panel.
It's private.
Well, the week has been the week has been
Don't be jealous.
the week has been eventful. I must say, we have continued to see key developments on the political scene. Political parties continue with nominating people. In the past week, people were picking documents. This week, they returned them. There were some new faces that people didn't expect. They were there. There was a beehive of activity at the NRM, at the NUP party headquarters. We saw some key developments, including Robert Chagulanyi being cleared to run again for presidency. Nobody contested against him. Therefore, there will be no primary in the NUP to look for a presidential candidate. We know NRM already has President Yoweri Museveni, who has been endorsed in different parts of this country. But we also saw a new political party also electing its leadership. Matthias Impuga is the new president of the Democratic Front, and questions are around whether he will be running. Now, the focus seems to be on what is going to happen in the primaries. And already we are seeing things that are not going well. Yesterday, in Luemiaga, a supporter of Theodore Sechkubo was shot dead by guards of one of the people he is tussling it out with for the ticket of the NRM, that is Major General Washande, retired UPDF officer there, and issues being discussed. We understand investigations have been launched. We'll be watching closely to see what will be happening. But people are concerned about what is likely to happen in the primaries and the role the security is going to play in the entire election cycle. Earlier today, there was a discussion at one of the hotels here in Kampala, organized by the Uganda Human Rights Commission, and you could feel the tension and the tough words people were saying, expressing concern about what is likely to happen in this particular election. We'll be looking at all that in details. This week, the land question came back, the issue of the Bararo in northern Uganda. Well, President Yoweri Museveni issued an order they should leave that place. After leaders from that region complained, the Bararo are insisting they have a right to own and, settle anywhere in this country. The debate is there. That is something that the leaders from that region are completely opposed. But we also saw this week in Parliament, government tabling regulations whereby a landlord who is absent and tries to dodge receiving ground rent from a tenant will find that money either in a bank or at the sub-county headquarters. And people are concerned that the government is introducing, two centers of power on land, something that is likely to cause problems going forward. Of course, the interest of the government is to protect people against what they call illegal evictions. We know there's been a strike by teachers who teach arts. Well, the government has told them you either go back to work or you will be replaced by people who are waiting in the wings to actually take your jobs. The government maintains there is no money. Money is being spent on elections, and we heard from the state minister in charge of public service, Mary Mugasa, who actually said the budget is focusing on the elections and the teachers are better off going back to the classes. Now, they want their salary enhanced, just like what happened with those teaching science. We know President Yoweri Museveni has insisted that the scientists have a key role to play, and therefore they needed to be remunerated better. How will this issue end? Will the teachers go back to class, or should the government look for money and actually solve their problem? Now, time allowing, we'll go to our neighbors, Kenya, where reports suggest that 16 people have so far been killed. The government says there are only 8. We know that there are over 400 injured, and this is because of the demonstrations that have been going on there in that country, especially in the major cities. And the government has described these demonstrations as terrorism disguised as dissent. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's begin this discussion by focusing on what has been happening here first. And we want to begin with the political environment in our country. And let me begin with you, Dr. Sarah Birete, on what you saw this week, what you liked and what you disliked on the political scene.
Well, this week we have still seen the political party nominations, mainly the three parties, the National Unity Platform, the NRM, and the PFF. I don't know whether
FDC also did some activities this week.
This week?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so basically it's still the internal party process to select their flag bearers for the upcoming elections. It has been largely peaceful, save for what's happening in Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe in the grassroots elections had failed to elect for the same reasons of violence. I don't know whether they've elected so far. And in the negotiations, we saw one of the parliamentary candidates pulling out for the president's brother. And in Remiaga, where there was no mitigation, first was the controversy of academic qualifications for the general. And then the document, also controversial document from National Council for Higher Education, trying to equate the several UPDF certificates. I hope they didn't add the driving permit as equivalent for senior 6. And one of the controversial statements was that UPDF existed in 1982. It did not exist. In 1982, we were under the UNLA as the National Army. We did not have UPDF. UPDF was born after the creation. It's a creature of the 1995 Constitution. So if General Rashande was in the army, then his certificate should read Uganda National Liberation Army, not the Uganda People's Defense Forces, which was created under the 1995 Constitution. So, but what is very unfortunate is the violence. When a person contests in elections and is guarded by the army, there are regulations. These armed guards should not go through public rallies. They should stay a distance if they are armed. If they are to go through, public rallies, they should disarm. So when you have this clash with the military guards, it's very unfortunate, very unprofessional, and the loss of a life, extremely unfortunate, and I send my condolences to the parents of the young man that was shot dead. I hope the family will be compensated. Not that compensation brings back life, but there should be compensation for wrongs committed by the government. The MP himself, who is still running for re-election, Honorable Sechikubo, was shot, and some other people. Very unfortunate. And this is so far the first case of extreme violence under the 2026 elections. Ugandans are generally tired of misconduct of the army, of violence in elections, of vulgarization, and the way the UPDF usurps the functions of UPDF. I read the story in the Daily Monitor. The claim by UPDF was that they were dispersing an illegal assembly. Public order management is the function of UPDF, police. It's the function of police, not UPDF. Do they even understand the definition of illegal assembly or what is expected to be done? I doubt, because their functions are completely different, away from the day-to-day lives of the people. I think everybody needs to keep in their lane if we are to have a peaceful election.
All right. Thank you so much for your contribution there. Let's go to Mr. Ocheno. Mr. Ocheno, if you can also give us your view on what transpired this week before we open up for a deeper discussion.
I think I really must start with the unacceptable killing of a young civilian in the Sechikubo event. And this happening merely within a campaign around primaries, merely NRA primaries, doesn't augur well to our country. Number two, I think I find it completely unacceptable that in this case, as Sarah says, that the armed guards are not police, but army men. What are they doing in the election campaigns? And number three, I suggest that regardless of the circumstances, Sarah, compensation to family or not, I think this is something that I ask that is investigated. It's a political matter. It must become a campaign matter. And I think some of my colleagues here and those listening, particularly from civil society and others, must be very concerned that if we can begin with deaths, a direct killing of a supporter of a candidate during primaries, and this is NRA primaries itself, what is it going to be like when we go through the formal election campaigns and have not lost out on the 2021 elections when we lost several dozen citizens and seemingly not many people have been held to account. So I think government needs to take responsibility. I think the minister concerned, responsible, must come forward. I think the Minister for Internal Affairs must take a lead role in this, and sometimes General Tafire once in a while happens to be possibly among the more sensible guys in NRA. I think he should take a position on this because, he leads, he's the Minister for Police. And my brother Jacob both must explain what the army is doing in the primaries for a political party and what they're doing with arms and guns there. Campaigns for primaries is not another Luwero war. That's part of the problem. If you're linked to guys who know no politics, but militarism. It's really genocide, and for me this irritates me because I think we've gone through this again and again and again, and I think the hope that we're wanting to give our young people, and Friday, upon when I come to you and I enjoy these spaces, we come to have a conversation to try and push Uganda in a new direction. So I think it's really, really very unfortunate. But finally, I think that political parties and political party leaders ought to come and engage more on this, so that together with the Electoral Commission, we have a reasonable understanding, and constitutional lawyers like Sarah should be helping us to make sure that, well, maybe part of the conversation we have between now and at the beginning of the formal campaigns, that there's a general understanding and agreement that we will not have soldiers. And Simon Bemakama is a fantastic guy, a chairperson of the Electoral Commission. I think a few weeks ago, at last said something which was rather sensible, that, people should keep to their lane. I think we should be able to push that the military should push to their lane. Even the police should push to their lane, only exceptionally when they're actually quite clear required.
All right. Let's bring in the Honorable Simon Mulongo. Thoughts there about what transpired this week on the political scene. Honorable Mulongo, your quick view.
I think, thank you for that question, and thank you for the colleagues for the comments. VNRM political organization is the largest party in the sense that the entire 72 or so thousand villages, it has contestants with such a large membership, whose inter-party competition, if you earn it, you're like 70% done for the general elections. So definitely the competition for the primaries is so tight simply because of that. In the areas where the still stronghold of NRM, winning NRM primaries definitely gives you almost a ticket for the good performance.
So that's why it is a do or die.
So that's why it is a cutthroat competition. And I'm happy that the response is so huge in all parts of the country. I say this because a number of political parties do not have even participation in various areas because they don't have members. And as such, or if somebody did, could just be a sole actor in a sea of the NRM members. And it will be very inconsequential finally for such a person, because then it will not make an impact to contest against the stalwart NRM members or participants in the elections. I want to comment on that of General Sunday. Yes, the National Council of Higher Education, I don't know how they communicated, but I remember what we did in the Constituent Assembly is to provide for A-level equivalent, and we did recognize military training of a period exceeding a certain time, actually 6 months, if it's a professional training program. So because the number of courses run between 6 to 12 months, and so they gain some professional insights into leadership. You see, military is not just shooting a gun. Military training involves, I've done courses in military colleges, and we learn not other than just statecraft, strategy, and leadership and command. It is quite a lot. It's not just about arms handling and strategy and tactics for fighting. It is to do with the leadership, command, relations, international relations, for example, issues of negotiations, engagement. So definitely people who have done these professional courses are not just people who look at dismantling and assembling a gun. It has quite a lot to do with leadership, command, statecraft, and so on, running affairs of a country, and so on. So really, somebody who has done these courses, which professional courses, it has to be seen to be even. Because now in the country, when I was in Parliament, as the Vice Chair of Defense and Internal Affairs, we did insist on equating our military programs with our regular curriculums along with the academics in this country. And this was done. Now, anybody qualifying in Uganda, now I'm talking about now, in this institutions, academies of UPDF, have equivalent with the civil institutions. I know the argument is that in 1982, that was not there. It's true, it was not there. There are those who could have done even before that. But the issue is that, did you go through a course whose modules, whose syllabi can be equated? Because they can look at, because that's what, if you go for foreign courses, for example, the National Council for Higher Education will always review your courses that you've done and make it equivalent to whatever standards of qualification in this country. So I'm sure that's what they should have done.
So we should assume that General Salim Saleh did not attain any military training from the time he came from the bush, because he was denied being a minister on account of qualifications.
And then studied.
What I know is that General Saleh did go through a number of courses. I remember at that time the Council for Higher Education was not in place. He did first of all Senior 6, because he was in Naxongola, was an RDC in Luero, when he came to do Senior 4 and Senior 6. Then secondly, he went through Officer's Basic Course, which makes you an officer in the military, and that course is about 12 months, and it's definitely a professional course. He also did a Senior Command and Staff College in Jinja, and that makes him well suitable and qualified for this.
Let's take a break now.
So I say that without any fear for contradiction, that General Saleh is overly qualified for more than Senior 6.
All right, let's go for a break now. When we return, we'll open up the discussion, and we'll begin with Mr. Michael Aboneka. Since we have all seen that one of the major issue that cuts across from the submission that you have all made is the issue of the fear that people have about election violence and the role the security forces are likely to play. We will pick it up from there as we continue reflecting on the major events of the week. Stay tuned, Radio 1 FM 90. Spectrum Extra continues after this break. Well, I'm glad that you're still with us on Spectrum Extra live on Radio 1 FM 90, reviewing the major events of the week. We've just been reflecting on what the political terrain looked like this particular week. And one particular issue cuts across, and that's the fear people have about what is likely to happen in the election process going forward. And the panel, Honorable Simon Mulongo, Mr. Joseph Ochieno, Dr. Sarah Birete, and now coming on the mic is Honorable soon to be Mr. Michael Aboneka. Michael Aboneka. The issue that cuts across from the panelists today is the concern, the fear about what is likely to happen in the 2026 general elections, especially on the side of violence, but also the questions around the role of the army in the election process. Let's kick it off from there.
Thank you, Kenneth. I think that very quickly, in 2 seconds, is that and Simon is here, that I was either a baby or trying to emerge from my mother's womb when people are trying to craft the constitution, the kind of constitution we want in our country. But the role of the army, really, if you read 208 and 209, the constitution, is that their role is distinct. Preserve and keep the integrity of the integrity of the sovereignty in terms of the borders and stuff like that. And that's why we have internal affairs run by others, civilian police and the rest. It's because that you can't do double functions. And I think this will also be a question for us to ask: why do we have police in the army? Why do we have generals running the civilian police? Because that also now probably is what we are seeing now. That you have an army person sitting in a civilian police giving orders. What is he going to give the orders that is trained as an army person, or what he's supposed to do as a police? Because the training is different. As an army person, you're trained. Besides the things that they have to study, ideology and the other things, is that what is your first role is to protect the country, the sovereign integrity of the country. Now, when you bring that person without even a refresher of what a police is supposed to do, and now he's heading an institution of police, what is expected? So sometimes so now it's difficult to differentiate between Uganda Police Force from Uganda People's Defense Forces when you have army guys in police and taking big roles. But back to the question is that, unfortunately, and I term it as blood elections, in one of my chapters I'm writing somewhere, and I've been documenting this process. It's not the very first time. You've seen military people being commandeered by the commanders shooting civilians, even when they're not invited. I know the UPDF Act and the law, the Constitution talks about UPDF shall be invited if the police is overwhelmed. And one of the things we've been asking is that, is there some bit of evidence to show that actually we were overwhelmed and therefore we invited you? But the deployment even happens before the event. And then they will tell you, we had the intelligence that maybe there will be disturbance, that maybe there will be rebels and terrorists and fake bombs now. So I think that the role of the army in elections is that theirs is to worry about their borders, to worry about security installations, and not the civilian activity that is happening. Now, they're even supposed to be out of the polling zones. In their barracks, the army should now be planning, okay, what happens when everyone is focusing into the internal activity of the country. But for them to even ask for budgets that we need to be at the polling stations, we need to make sure that the terrorists do not attack us. But for the last 5 years, what have you been doing? Are you saying that now we're going to have more attacks in these 6 months than the 4 years? So I think that, and the problem is that they don't just be there to keep law and order. They destabilize. You find the army zone that is shooting, moreover in the primaries, and the army is beating journalists, and the fear, the members that are deployed. So even if I wanted to vote, and every day we talk about voter apathy, low voter turnout, and the members are deployed on the streets, I will not be able to vote. So that is also something that we need to talk about. If we are saying that Ugandans are free, they shall exercise their freedom, they shall exercise their choice on who to govern them by electing, then we should have a conducive environment. Lastly, on that, we lack what we call an independent oversight body over police and UPDF. Kenya has an independent authority. South Africa has a commission. In this country, if a soldier has a problem with the CDF, where do they go to? It's not a human rights issue, but I have.
They go to court martial.
You see, that is also another different thing. A court martial is for service offences. If I have an issue about my promotion, or I have an issue with the CDF himself, and I'm a serving officer, where do I go? If I have an issue with the IGP as a police officer, where do I go? So we need to have an independent oversight authority or tribunal, whatever name you call it, over this. Because you see, like South Africa, it has to be a resolution by parliament to allow the army on the streets.
Yes.
You can't just deploy whenever you want and And also the issue of uncoordinated troops. The Minister of Internal Affairs tells you, we don't need the army in the politics and in elections. And then the army is being deployed. But then also we have the commander-in-chief. And then you have the CDF. So who is giving the command? As a minister, you sit in the cabinet with the commander-in-chief. And when you talk to the rest of the world, you say it is wrong, we should not have them there. So who is not telling who what to do? And I think that when we're talking about Uganda being a democratic state, having all these elections, elections now become a sad state of event that, guys, when are we overcoming elections? Because then there's issues of death, there's issues of blood shed, and the rest shouldn't be the issue. Right. So I hope that the military this time around will behave, we hope, because Kawempe was nasty. Now Remiaga is nasty. You don't know what else is going to be nasty.
All right. Let's go to Honorable Simon Mlongo. Honorable Simon Mlongo, of all people on this table, you have some considerable knowledge about the military, but also as a person who was part of the people who drafted the Constitution. The role of the military in the election process is yet again at the forefront of the discussion. When you go in places where issues of elections are being discussed, in your view, do we actually need the army in the election process? Because there's some people actually saying we need to completely get them out, have enough deployment, enough recruitment of the police for purposely handling election matters.
First of all, allow me to lack of an appellate system in the case of complaint, oversight issues, oversight, and so on. Just like the government has oversight institutions within itself, because it's supposed to have self-regulating institutions in every ministry, and also overall as a government, we have the Human Rights Commission, which serves everybody and anybody in the country, and that includes everyone. But nonetheless, within the Ministry of Defense and UPDF in particular, there are boards and tribunals that handle independent complaints that require independent evaluation, and so you can challenge your commander in case of if you feel you are aggrieved. So there are mechanisms that are already there, because you cannot have a system that lasts all this long without having any serious issues being raised, and you think there are no mechanisms to handle them. So they are there. And I think my colleague should have just posed questions, but not to assert as if that is a conclusion. Regarding the issue of the military participating in issues in elections and other matters of public interest, this is well provided for in the Constitution and secondary laws, that the UPDF can be called upon to do civil activities, either to reinforce the police or even to act as long as the matters can threaten the constitutionality of this country. So it is not just about borders. I don't know how we read this. It's not just about borders. And we have UPDF. The UPDF provides for the military to do activities, even civil activities, whether it is farming, whether it is engineering. They can enter contracts to participate in the matters that can develop this country. So it is provided for. The other issue, perhaps much more serious, is the numbers of police. International ratio is supposed to be 400 people per an officer in police. But that would mean that we have close to 100 and something thousand. If you get the ratio of 45 million to what we have, the police are about 32,000 in number. That is too small. A ratio would be actually more close to 3,000 people for a police officer, and that makes it extremely small. And if you see the policy of late of having police present every sub-county, it makes actually some of these police forces having 2 policemen in this whole sub-county. And so the issue of reinforcement and support from the other uniformed personnel, particularly the military and even sometimes prison services, it becomes very important. So it's by necessity that the EPD have been brought into this other arena. In fact, even the ordinary security policing around, you see military on the pickups with the police. Some of these military have been stationed in strategic areas to support the military in sweeping, for example, in case of terrorism and so on. Finally, there is no deployment that is ever done before a security assessment is done. So a security plan is drawn up. They look at the nature of the threat, the levels of the threat, and therefore the requirement in terms of manpower, do with the monitoring some cells, activity in some cells of the enemy forces like ADF and Al-Shabaab. Then they bring in more specialized elements to come in. So really it is not per se just people walking around. It is based on threat assessment and the security plans therein.
All right. And now let's bring in Mr. Joseph Ochieno. Mr. Joseph Ochieno, one of the historical facts, things that I've heard people talking about, one of the reasons why Dr. Bote did not survive politically is he did not enjoy the support of the army. But that's another discussion another day. But let's strictly focus on the role of the army. Why do you want the army to stay away? Yet the Constitution clearly states that they can be called upon to intervene and support the civil authority, the police, to provide extra security, because an election can invite, bad elements who would want to do sabotage.
I don't know what aspect of the Constitution refers to involving the army in primary elections and killing Ugandan citizens like what has happened within this week. I don't know where the army go to the authority and the assessment in Kawempe that we under so much threat that the JAT needed to be deployed to go and whip our citizens in Kawempe as they did, whip journalists as they did, break cameras and cause the kind of mayhem that they did in Kawempe. I don't know where that is. Simon seems to suggest that the regulatory mechanisms that Mike omitted. I don't know what a regulatory body that is, because the first time I would be hearing what exactly, and I think you need to be very clear about it. Michael is asking for, and the future UPC government would install, and I already committed this over the last 5 years actually, that we need an independent police complaints authority, to oversee complaints around the police alone. On the military, within the context of what Simon's saying, Mike said, it is something that really need to be able to do that. But to take the tiny little swipe that he took on Milton Obote, no, Milton Obote was the only leader.
I only told you.
Was the only
what I had.
Was the only leader that was elected democratically in this country twice. The only leader to have gone to State House with the mandate of the civilian authorities, the majority of the people, and the only one who was rudely ejected using armed people, but predominantly backed by external forces. That Simon, somebody who's ideologically quite grounded, should actually find it contradictory to refer to that. No, and when Obote is overthrown, it is not Obote or UPC, it's actually the people of Uganda who lose their legitimate and elected government. And if you can consider that in 2025, we are talking about an election, a primary election for NRA, then you can imagine what was happening in 1980. So I am not going back because of the usual conversation about UPC and others. It's about putting context. So your question about Obote and that is extremely important. It's genuinely a shame that we would be having a conversation under an NRA regime of 40 years and they still talk about security, which links me up to the fact that, the recent so-called bomb thing in which an individual was killed, I asked a question that in Ireland, there was this big thing called Death on the Rock, where British security forces killed IRA suspects of the then Republican Army of Ireland in a manner in which people generally believed that these guys needed to have been arrested rather than killed. Here in Kampala, under NRA, 40 years, you talk about 40 years, we have a situation in which a suspect, even if they were genuine suspects, in this case, we are teaching the security services bad manners. We're teaching security services bad manners so that they can get away with anything they want. But the fact that, of course, it's quite clearly a military regime, a military administration, no surprise that, well, at the heart of it is militarism rather than rule of law.
All right. Let's go to Dr. Sarah Village. We want also to hear your view on the issue of the army. You're one of those people who actually thinks the army has no place in our election process. But we are faced with challenges that are across our neighbors. We know internal issues. We have seen also situations where people have been somehow violent and the army has come in to support the police. Why do you want the army out of the election process?
Well, I think there is a deliberate misreading of the Constitution.
Yeah.
The Constitution provides for the police to invite the army in situations of disaster and emergency. Elections is none of those. A civilian exercise on who should govern them cannot be treated as a disaster or as an emergency. The mandate of the army is to protect the territorial integrity of the country. Those are borders. You talked of the neighbors, so let them come to the borders. The other duty is to protect Ugandans with their property. The day-to-day policing, law and order matters is the work of police. Police during elections and in accordance with our electoral laws is supposed to recruit polling constables to supplement their efforts. So where they have gaps, we are supposed to have a recruitment of temporary policemen that we call constables for purposes of elections. We have done this. By the way, this will be the 7th election under the 1995 Constitution. As a country, generally since independence, it's the 11th election. And for the past 5 elections, the police has been recruiting polling constables to support there are gaps that they have as police in manning polling centers in the country. It's not the work of the army. Our laws even have regulations on where armed men must disarm before entering a polling station. So they cannot give them duties. Nobody should enter a polling station with a gun. It is just impunity. And unfortunately, the UPDF now is operating under excessive impunity. And for several reasons, I know that the police does not invite them. They invite themselves, even they go ahead of the police. So, it is just abuse. We need to have...
They may not invite themselves. There is what we understand is called the joint operations, where they sit together from time to time, assess the security needs, and respond as a group.
I am telling you, the law says they should be invited. Does not say they assess and come. So that is different from the Constitution. Yeah. So that is an excuse to subdue the work of police, to usurp the functions of police. The situation that we are faced with. Look at Kawempe. One by-election in the whole country. And then do you want to say that the police was overwhelmed in just a mere by-election in an urban constituency? Was the police overwhelmed? We have more than 50,000 policemen. Were they overwhelmed for Kawempe? Just one election in the whole country. Were they overwhelmed? No. Did they invite the army? No. And who caused chaos? The army. So they just vulgarize our elections. Actually, the Article 1, which says that power belongs to the people, has been changed by the army. In actual sense, power belongs to the army now. It doesn't belong to the people. That's the situation that we are in under President Museveni currently.
All right. And if you don't mind, actually, Sarah, the army officer who attempted to subdue the others in Kawempe, is it the case that that officer
Captain Auma is under arrest?
Is now under arrest and going to trouble? That's an extraordinary thing. Initially, when I saw it, I thought it was actually fake news.
It is true.
Extraordinary situation we are.
Captain Auma, who restrained that officer.
Someone looks surprised. Maybe
is she major or captain? She's under arrest. She could be in a basement. I don't know.
I think if somebody is arrested, it means that person is subjected to some due process. And that shows you how legally the government runs its affairs. But let me come to the issue of...
It's one point of arrest. It's, when you are under arrest, you should be produced in courts of law within 48 hours. But, this is somebody arrested during Kawempe by-elections. We are just getting to know her whereabouts, and she has not been produced in any court of law.
Well, but you don't know what's happening, actually, do you? The fact
she's under arrest.
You're waiting at the courts of law somewhere. You don't know whether there's a tribunal that's handling it, to which you may not have been invited. That's what I mean.
Is it a secret exercise?
Well, there's no obligation that they must be notified. There's no law to that effect. But I want to say this. The legal and constitutional basis for the UPDF involvement, both the 95 Constitution, to which I was one of the people who made it, and also the UPDF Act of 2005. And as a contributor to both instruments. And I want to say that Article 29 spells out the functions of defense forces, including to foster harmony and understanding between the defense forces and civilians. Section 42 is the defense forces may, when called upon, assist the civil authorities.
Read the Constitution. It is superior.
Okay? Yes, and disasters and other matters of public interest.
Read the Constitution.
In this case,
the UPDF Act is inferior to the Constitution.
Yes.
But they also think they may be invited.
Yes, may be invited.
They don't go by themselves.
Yes, they don't go by themselves.
Okay.
These UPDF you see in the uniform together with the police act under strict invitations.
The question,
I wanted to show me
the question is,
the UPDF was not being invited.
Not at all.
They have been invited.
At times they are the first to be there.
Because you don't know what the invitation stated.
No.
If you have it, show us when it said that it was only once, and show us that they have complained that they were not invited. Show us.
Yeah.
If you don't have that, those two, the letter that restricted the dates, so they're acting outside that letter, or that they're acting without invitation, show us. If you don't show us, Mr. Moderator, they should withdraw those type of illusionary allegations against the good use of the
actually we are saying that to show us that they were invited.
No, it is you who alleges must provide.
Because we have always asked them.
If you are the ones who are alleging, that's the principle of law.
Yes.
And you're a lawyer.
Yeah, Simon, what does
let me tell you that the UPDF, one, acts under lawful circumstances. Two, they are transparent in their activities. Three, they are subordinate to civil authority and control, either by the minister or if it is the police and the command of the police, and unless otherwise authorized to do so differently, and they focus on genuine public interest. And this should be stated right here. So for us to begin alleging simply because we have other personal interests in the matter,
it is not an allegation.
If we both are interested in law and order in this country, then we should just be cloudy. And
can I clarify?
Mr. Moderator, if the mistakes done, for example, overbearance by the military and even of the police, we're right to complain.
Right. Can I clarify? In Kawempe by-election, when Jad first appeared, the police spokesperson was asked, did you invite the army? He said no. So, that's the spokesperson of the police. So how else are we supposed to know as civilians?
But we have also been
asking. Give us the documents to show that they were not.
I'm quoting the spokesperson of the police.
But also over time, during the excesses by the security agencies, we have always been asking police, did you ever invite the UPDF? And how? What is the mechanism? Because how do you invite them? Do you send a radio call? Do you write a letter? Because you see, this is a matter of law. You can't say we are using our military process.
Meetings that are conducted, and they assess situations and agree whether there can be joint deployment or even a singular deployment of the UPDF for police alone, or actually together with the police.
So and the police must be aware.
If the IGP and the directors, including the CDF or deputy CDF and their chiefs, are in the same meeting, in the same boardroom, they're discussing and agreeing.
That's not an invitation.
Of course, they will agree.
Let me tell the other controversies surrounding elections.
If the IGP says
the police
by this and therefore need this number, that is the
Honorable Morongo. In these coming elections, the police shared the budget for elections.
And the army also.
And the army shared their own budget higher than the police. Yet when you go in our electoral laws, the duty of policing elections is for Uganda Police Force. So if the army comes on the invitation of the police, one would assume that then they use the budget of the police, yes, and they shouldn't be budgeting for elections.
Let's go for a break now and then continue with this discussion. Spectrum is continues after this break on Radio 1 FM 90. Well, thank you so much for staying with us on Spectrum Extra live on Radio 1 FM 90, reviewing the major events of the week. A panel of 4 people here in studio, including the Honorable Simon Mulongo, Governance and Security Expert, Mr. Michael Aboneka, lawyer and pundit on social and political matters, Dr. Sarah Virete, Executive Director, Center for Constitutional Governance, Mr. Joseph Ocheno, UPC member and pundit on governance matters. My name is Kenneth Anderson Lukwago, your host. We have comments coming in from the listeners. I'll begin with one that comes in from Kauma Digo, listening in from Mitiana. He says it's saddening to see the UPDF predecessor of the NRA conducting itself in a manner similar to that of UNLA in 1980. The UNLA vulgarized the Ugandan election of 1980 in favor of UPC, as UPDF is now doing in favor of the NRA. We have another comment. SADA should join politics and represent our people and deliver good services to our people than being an opposition. That's a comment that comes in from Anthony. Then Caesar Rising from Zambia, he says, I think Uganda police have got professional standard unit where complaints can be raised against errant police officers. Then we have another comment here. A regime that came to power through bloodshed has only perfected one thing, killing its own citizens. For 40 years, violence has been its language and survival tool. Today, it kills even its own supporters. I see something unethical for military who are supposed to hunt for terrorists or protecting the boundaries of Uganda. They are now busy being hired to disrupt democracy as if they are no civil police officers. This is a commanding error. Go to Kenya and learn more and become more professional. And then he writes and says, one Uganda, one sufferer. Those ignorant voters will learn the hard way that NRM will finish us all. That is a comment coming in from someone who identifies himself as Orlando. And he says greetings to Ocheno and Dr. Sarah. Very quickly, just for those who have anything hanging that they want to finally say about this issue of the security.
The person telling that I should go and represent my people, I'm sure that even on this show, I'm representing them.
You are representing
and I'm also representing the non-state actors, the civic leaders. I'm not yet a member of opposition. I am maybe a potential.
You're a potential member of opposition. All right, that's your own opinion there, Dr. Sarabe.
And the guy from Mutiana, who possibly still has a bit of hangover over, because many people in Mutiana thought in 1980 that their relief, their gods was going to come from the bushes of Luweru rather than Museveni and Kagame. 40 years later, it's not happened. So, look, 1980 general elections is the last election that delivered a president for this country. I can tell you 1980 general elections, Michael, I had turned 18. I never saw a single police officer. I'm sorry, I've been telling you this. I never saw a single police officer in Nagonga. So it was the last most peaceful elections. And here in Buganda, if you won overwhelmingly, no.
I should have not mentioned.
That's a propaganda. That's a propaganda. People need to be able to wake up to its reality. No. The army, the allegations about the army and rigging elections, Museveni had been in power for the last 40 years. They couldn't prove it. No, Tafere confirmed that they're busy breaking people's necks here in the world basically to make arrangements for the Simons to come and stay in power and Museveni to go by Chwezi, and this is where we are. Terrible. We're trying to find a way in which we to deal with it.
All right, Dr. Sarah, you will take the lead on this particular topic, the issue of Balalo.
Mr. Chairman,
I'll come to you.
The question, before we go to the next chapter.
We'll hear from you. I'll give you an opportunity to wind up. Let's move on because time is also not on our side. Dr. Sarah, on the issue of the Balalo.
The Balalo. Well, the Balalo has been a controversial issue in northern Uganda since 2017. There has been several directives of the president trying to resettle the Balalo. It's alleged that they are refugees who moved from Tanzania after the expulsion of cattle keepers by President Kikwete in 2013. But if you look at the investigation report by the committee after the 2023 presidential executive order on northern Uganda, the president put up a committee.
The select committee.
Yes. To investigate take stock of the Balalo, who owns land, how many are there. You find that most of them are coming from districts of Western Uganda predominantly, and they are not refugees. The ones in Book 1. The committee produced Book 1 and Book 2, and when have access to Book 1, they come from districts in the cattle corridor as compared to the information that these are people who were expelled from Tanzania.
Does the report indicate why they left the cattle corridor? Why they left the cattle corridor to move to where they are?
The report says they are in search of pasture and water. You know the usual excuse of nomadic pastoralists. They are always moving from place to place in search of water and pasture. That's what even we studied as children in primary school. So it's nothing new. So when you look at the events, the politics surrounding the Balalo situation, first of all, it's alleged that about 5 cabinet ministers and a number of generals are part of the people that have hired Balalo. Because Balalo are basically herds, it's not necessarily that they own the farms. So this tells why some of these people are armed. Because the problems from the actual local community is insecurity, intimidation, arrogance, and then the imbalance in the money economy, the local money economy in the community, vulnerability of the people that are emerging from conflict, and then the issue of land tenure system and the underlying factors of mineral resources. So when you look at the land tenure systems, the report says 71% of the land in Acholi is clan, owned by the clan. 15% is owned by family. The remaining balance is the only land that is owned by individuals. So when you go and buy land in Acholi, who has sold to you? Is it the individual owners who are about 5%? Is it the family? If the family has sold to you, do you have minutes of the whole family members making a resolution to sell to you with the terms of sale or of contract? If it is a clan, has the clan sat and made a resolution to sell land to you? So you will find that most likely the people who are alleged to have bought land in northern Uganda, they've bought air, depending on who you have bought from, or depending on whether you've done due diligence. So you will find that maybe 80% of these Vararo don't have what we call a good title in law, and then they are not donors of land. So the issue of cattle, the first executive order directed that the Vararo must, fence. Those who have land must fence and provide water sources within the fences. So the issue of food security is brought by these loitering cattle that are destroying people's crops and causing, food insecurity within the community. And it's difficult for the locals to confront these armed people. Somebody is armed, has more money, you are a vulnerable community person, maybe poor with your own problems. How do you confront this rich armed man that his cattle has destroyed your crops? How do you get compensation? How do you get into dialogue? They are threatening everybody with the protection of government agencies. So this is at the height of the controversy in northern Uganda, and the suspicion that people could be using cattle as a guise to grab land which has rich minerals including marble, gold, oil and limestone underneath in districts of Amul, Ramok, Tuguma and other areas.
All right, let's go to Mr. Cheno. Mr. Cheno, let's hear your view on this particular issue of people complaining about the presence of armed cattle keepers known as Balar.
I think the implications are as grave as really the contemporary challenges we're facing in the Middle East. The implications are as grave as the possibilities of what a nation state we might have as Uganda, considering some of the nuances suggested by Sarah. Look, Mr. Museveni, in sometimes rather arrogant way, has sometimes almost nearly abused, I didn't say nearly abused the Karamojong people, that these terrible people with their primitive cultural ways of living, instead of us giving them a bati and then beginning to mobilize animals and goats and looking after them, they get themselves stuck to this thing about not only nomadic life, but this thing about hunting and chasing land for their cattle. Yeah. Then we go ahead and give them a bati, Karamojogo. Give them goats. They need to abandon that primitive way. They need to look at how we look after animals in Kisozi. Yeah. Then the Mabati is stolen. So stolen that sometimes Museveni's own Minister of Finance finds some of the Mabatis miraculously finding their ways in his garage. Yeah? Now that's Karamoja. Now this special Balalo thing, when it comes, the answer is different. Uganda, territorial kind of thing. The law, yes, Ugandans should live within whatever kind of... If that's the case, they are Balalo Hwechis from Tanzania. Are they Ugandans? If that's the case, how do they find themselves in Uganda? If that's the case, why didn't they get some bit of Kisozi? Because Kisozi is almost a contested area anyway, because it used to be government land. I still want to know how to eventually get some Museveni's thing. But talk about that. How did these guys not get Bambi, get a bit of Kisozi, from Tanzania via wherever you came from? And then you go via Luweru area of Taucha, and then you jump across and they go to northern Uganda. Acholi and Langwan and West Nile, particularly Acholi, a post-conflict area that had suffered for nearly 20 years. The people of Acholi did not need Balalo to go and teach them how to farm. The people of Acholi needed urgent government intervention to try and help them to resettle, to mobilize, to reorganize, and to be able to make the best use of their land. But for some of the things, again, as I said, Sarah said, it's neither here nor there. How the Balalo or anybody carries guns for farming, I have no clue. How these guys go ahead and begin to farm like gauchos in Australia with guns and pickups in northern Uganda, I don't know. Who are these people? It's not surprising that many people, and many Acholi people, many northern Ugandans are telling me and are saying that this is a scheme by Mr. Museveni and his regime, and the original Bachwezi deal, of those days, to try and not only conquer them properly, because initially they chased people from Luero. You remember there was in Luero. In Luero, early 80s, that's why I say this thing very strongly. 1982, 81, 82, people of non-Bantu extraction in Luero, this official, were targeted deliberately by NRA bandits in Luero and chased. These are who has sort of part settled there. Some of these people think that, well, after Museveni came to power, it was not enough because there was this Wunu Mucholi thing in Kampala, and it happened. And then parts of that went to Teso, where Teso cattle and Lango cattle were brought into Kampala, the Karamojong of the South. They did that. And then part of that then came the War of 16 years in northern Uganda. And now, after these guys have been put down to their knees, the Balalo eventually become now the new Jesus in northern Uganda. A mission to redistribute Ugandan population in a manner in which it fits a certain group of people who wanted to liberate, allegedly, Uganda in 1981, 82, but to liberate Uganda for themselves and for their agenda. That's what's happening in northern Uganda. And it's up to Mr. Museveni and his regime to explain to Ugandans how we've ended up with this Balalo situation where in there. Now, granted, I saw his letter. It goes as deeply intellectual. Sometimes it can become rather impressive, like his letter to NAM. But the bottom line thing is the truth is hardly in there. Right. The Balalo should leave northern Uganda, and you know what? We should begin to have new conversation about land and land tenure, and we should make sure that northern Ugandan people are compensated for their cattle that NRA bandits and others stole and ate, and we should be able to help settle these people. And by this, not only northern Uganda, including Tororo, including my own village, Sarah, there are people who escaped and were chased and killed from Luero. One other elder died 3-4 months ago without justice from my own place in Nagogra. These are the things we need to be discussing.
All right. Mr. Mike Waboneka, your quick insight on the issue of the Balalo. They were first in Bulisa. Yes. And they have been spreading. They went in the east. They were there for quite some time. Now, Balalo are in the north.
And maybe they will be in Soga tomorrow. And I think that's the real question. When, because this is the first time, and it looks like we've not resolved this issue. Who are they? Have we profiled who the Balalo are? How many are they? And you see, it baffles me to say that people move from the west, the north, with all that cattle, unnoticed. And districts have what they call, health officers and the veterinary officers. You can't just move cattle like that.
That's correct. Actually, yeah, that's interesting point.
I want to find out, did they just take 2 cows and then in 3 years they multiplied? How did they cross all these districts and unchecked? Because you see in this country, you can't just move cattle like that, even when you're searching for green pastures and water. So I don't know. The other question is that, are you saying that we have better green pasture in Acholi and in Acholi better than elsewhere? And I have had the same issues. We have had the same issues in Kayunga. We have had the same issues in Busoga. Yes. And the dominant factor is that there are people with guns, either retired soldiers or soldiers involved in this process. So we might be thinking it is the normal nomad of a Muralo, but yet it is beyond that. Because who are these guys that actually can just go in an area and in the morning you wake up? Because you see, it is interesting that in the morning you wake up and find cows. How did they get there? Who transported them there? And I know that there's the issue we've been discussing, the right to movement and staying anywhere in a country, in a place of your choice under Article 29.
As long as you're citizen.
As long as you're a citizen. Now, what does that mean? Does that mean that if I have my rabbits, I don't know people who take care of rabbits, what they are called, that I can just go anywhere and let my rabbits eat people's plantations because I have a right to movement and stay wherever I want to stay? Because you see, we have to answer all those questions. Why is it that I'm not allowed to just move with my goats? I must give an inspection certificate, what have you?
Transport
yes, and all these things. But why is it that these people are allowed to move the way they want?
That's the question.
That's the question. There's a bigger question. Now, number two, we had the Bamugemere Commission on issues of land tenure, land problems. You see, we spent a lot of money in that commission. They flew even out of this country to learn this, I don't know, benchmark, whatever other people are doing. Where is that report?
Why would it be useful now?
This is a land issue. It's a land question. It's beyond just what we are seeing on the surface, that, we are movement of cattle. You see, you can be displaced in many ways. So that we need to start marking and triangulating these issues, that they are not just surface issues. But lastly, on that point, what does that mean? Now, let me tell you. Yesterday, I think today, a member of parliament goes on their X to say, and asks theirs, I think, commander, whatever they call it, that I want you to give me permission, mobilize underground, attack this small office. And I think they're insinuating some office that is supporting the executive order. And then their commander says, I have approved you. Now, this thing looks to be, it looks to be small, but it's not small. Because someone from, they call them Patriotic League, whatever they want to call themselves, thinks that a minister in charge of Northern Uganda is the problem. But if a minister is supposed to implement executive order in cabinet, and for you, because you think you're a member of Patriotic League, then you want to ask your principal that you can attack his office. I saw that clip. And if I were the minister, that's an issue that you should report to police. Because what do you want the minister to do? So I think we need to handle this thing very seriously and honestly. But the last question, you want them to leave Northern Uganda to where? Wherever they go, it's going to, how many executive orders are we going to?
Where did they come from?
That's the question. Where did they come from? We've not answered that one. You want them to leave Northern Uganda? In Busoga, I don't have land.
I have had President Yoweri Museveni discouraging that culture of moving with cattle. He has been telling people to do what they call zero grazing, have
paddocking and all
those kind of things. I'm surprised that this is still going on.
His friend says he has directed the Attorney General to make a law that criminalizes nomadic pastors.
Yeah, but
why these people are moving, why they cannot practice settled economy and so on. But there are reasons for people to move. One is the rate of population growth in this country is so high that the land is becoming even smaller occupation. And we're not conscious of it. We have very few millions recently, not even 20 years ago. And by 2050, we're going to be over 100 million people. But the land is not growing bigger. So we're not even responding to that. And people have been settling over time. Once they settled in the Greater Luero, which includes Naxongola, they moved across to Lao in the areas of Kokoro, areas of Gwingiri, areas of Maltar generally. And since we've seen people born in Teso, there are half-castes. They look like other people in the Western Uganda, but they're not actually Westerners. They are Northerners. And others in Northern Uganda, once the operation started ensuing in Northern Uganda, people ran away from their land. And you could see how much land which would have been smaller became very big.
People did not run away. They were told to go to IDP camps.
Well, I repeat, they ran away because operations were so harsh. The conditions were not capable of making people remain in the homesteads. Then there came arrangements for people to be encamped.
I will not repeat.
And that encampment happened in a manner that they wanted to free the land so that whoever was there was an enemy. so that you could starkly identify an enemy forces. So both happened. People ran away, but also organized resettlement was also done in encampments. Now, and to me, that could have provided some deceptive perception of free land. But also, it is complicated by the fact that the ratio of the population versus the land available in the north is so large compared to Bugichu, where we are over 200 and 300 or 400 people in a square kilometer. So that makes the place very difficult for people to go and settle in, even if some are there. For example, in northern, you're asking about Bugichu. In Miyembe, Lamburi, we have so many cattle keepers there. They have bought land. Some have hundreds of acres, others having tens of hectares. And as such, yes, we have them, and so on. And areas neighboring Karamoja, there are many Balalo there, so-called Balalo. And the Balalo are those cattle keepers, you and me, who are cattle keeping and acquiring big numbers of cattle. So really, it is not about Banyarwanda, as we allege. They could be Batora, they could be Banyankole, they could be Banyarwanda of either extraction, whether extract of Rwanda or Uganda. And they are moved there because they want bigger parts. Now, but the question is, how are they acquiring this land? How have they acquired it? The fact is that these people have done a number of approaches. There are those who have gone to an area they think is free and they settle on it. But there are those who have approached chiefs in that place and have written agreements. And then there are those, even if they have settled there properly with knowledge of the chiefs, they have gone beyond their boundaries and they have come into clashes with the crop growers. And that's become very sensitive. And then the other third thing is that we've seen issues of impunity where they act in breach of the laws and even local customs where they just drive their cattle across land and all this. So this has created friction. And I think one of the biggest causes is issues of impunity in the breach of laws and so on, and disregarding communication and having good rapport with the locals. And that's perhaps the biggest problem in that place. If they are behaving well, maybe it could have perhaps lessened the answer. Now, the mother of all question is what my brother is talking about, that drive away all these people. The laws are very clear. Land belongs to the people who own that land in accordance of the tenure systems that are defined, including customary. And even if it's customary, the rights of people depending on the clan, for example, that own that. So if I make an agreement with the clan head or the council of the clan, then definitely it confers upon me some rights. And even if you say drive them, it attracts a lot of legalities. Is it court order? Do you have procedures to follow? So for us to come here on a national radio like this and utter statements like drive them away, I wonder what kind of governments we're going to form, especially those governments people are looking forward to form, that they have particularly approaches of driving the people away. And this is very reminiscent of those governments that were there, because they were here before. And indeed, people supported us and we drove them out. And now they've come back under the audacity of freedoms and now they're making those kind of statements. So I wanted the public to disregard totally and with all content deserves, because really and we as the elites, the intelligentsia, must be able to speak with some degree of legal and political mindset that shows that we're educated.
All right, Spectrum X101 FM 90. Let's take a break now. When we return, we have issues to talk about, including the teacher strike, but also the violence in Nairobi and the impact it's likely to have on our neighbors. Stay tuned to 1 FM, then keep your comments coming at the WhatsApp line 0703 090 090.
Spectrum Xtra, Friday 7 to 9 p.m. on Radio 1 FM 90.
Religious leaders, mobilize your congregants and create gender-balanced investment clubs. Then log on to www.tripodempire.com and click on Cabinet Files to follow up. While embassies will invite gender-balanced investment clubs to reciprocate trade in local currencies and click on Advisory Service to follow up. For guild presidents, councillors and members of parliament. Follow up by clicking on civic education. For more information, visit www.crippledempire.com or at New Pioneer Mall, Suite PG 621, opposite Mavilizi Complex.
Hello.
Some fine things.
We are here gearing up for the big days.
Do you have any special plans?
I'm planning to put some funds together to help the needy.
It would be good to consider the source and quality of the food you give out.
Considering maize flour and wheat flour for the porridge and chapati.
You go for supreme maize and wheat flour, manufactured by Mandela Millers.
Spring flour comes in both wheat and maize. It is very nutritious, tasty and healthy. It is fortified with 9 vitamins and minerals. Spring flour stretches easily and uses less oil. Find spring flour in all supermarkets and shops around the country. It is manufactured by the Mandela Millers at Busega Roundabout, Asaka Road.
Spectrum Extra, Fridays 7 to 9 p.m. on Radio 1 FM 90.
Thank you so much for staying with us on Spectrum Extra, viewing the major events of the week. We have comments that are coming in from the listeners, and I want to begin with this one from Mr. Kamadi Bionavie, who is from the Uganda Human Rights Commission, who says, inform Honorable Mlongo that the population of UPF is 52,000. That's the Uganda Police Force. Yeah. And they have recruited 10,000 ahead of the elections. Not be pretend that he's an expert on security when he misses the obvious in regard to the involvement of the army in our politics. Then we have another comment. Thank you for the program, Mr. Mlongo, and his ilk think they can always gaslight us. The police spokesperson and the Minister of Internal Affairs are on record denying inviting the army. How can Mr. Mlongo claim the invitation was done through a joint meeting unknown to the spokesperson of the police? That's Henry with that comment from Banda. Caesar, listening in from Zambia, says, I think Uganda Police has got professional standard unit where complaints can be raised and errant police officers handled. Well, that's the feedback we are getting. Now, let's shift our gears very quickly, unless someone wants to comment on those comments, those points that are coming from the listeners. Honorable Mlongo, would you like to do so?
Yes. First of all, I'm happy I'm reminded about the numbers, and definitely take that for information. I'm not sure about the 52, whether it's exact less or more, but I do take the first. My sources is to say you can say otherwise as an opinion, but my opinion is very clear. I know how the law operates. I know how the functionality of the sister institutions of the police and the military cooperatively work together and plan out and jointly deploy and so on. But the incident of Kawempe, yes, it has come under scrutiny, but that is more exception than actually the norm. And also the use of the military, it's provided for under the law, the constitution, and also the secondary laws that provide for the same. And to say the UPDF officers should not work with the police, I think that's far from it. Those two are uniformed personnel. They have similar target interests in terms of the securities of this country, and therefore they have to work together depending on the nature of the threats. And remember, the threats these days are more sophisticated than just by the police alone. All right, so I think that it's just right and fitting that the police and the military can work together.
All right, another matter that made the headlines this week is the strike of the teachers who actually teach art subjects. They want their salary enhanced. The Minister of Public Service says there's no money. They also say that, if these teachers do not go back to class, they are going to be replaced by others. Let's begin with you, Ms. Ochen.
Extremely sad. I am a son of a grade 1 teacher, guest on this program. I remember saying that because of education as the number one equalizer, I am Ocheno. Part of my long campaigns away from matters of other human rights has really been around questions of investments and overhaul of educational systems as skilled, health services systems as skilled, and many other sorts of skills. But to focus on this educational thing, of course, as you say, there's no time. It's extraordinary that anybody could think of going through a process in which they don't prioritize teachers, as I said. And number two, the idea that brought this nonsense that science teachers are specialist teachers when we are literally ruled by artists today. I don't understand it. I think a future UPC government will very quickly review these things and actually mainstream this, one, but two, urgently and quickly. All of us professionals should rally around teachers and teachers' question, teachers' pay, but also to make it part of the campaign. I know we just come through the budget cycle. I think the campaign should be that, well, more resources should be injected in education, including teachers' pay generally, and into other sectors like health and others. That really is the way. But to do it in such a manner that we have politicians, some of whom sometimes have got dubious qualification records, who actually can taunt teachers who are basically people who are trying to help build foundation for our future, is completely unacceptable.
All right, let's go to Dr. Sarah. Dr. Sarah Village, your take on the issue of the teachers.
You know, the principle of equality demands that people who have the same qualifications, who teach for the same number of hours per week, doing the same job, must have equal pay. Equal pay for knowledge
and execution. For example, if you have to do preparation of chemicals and the issues of examining
the same number of hours,
it's not the same because this
standard is the working hours.
I think she had finished, and I'm just saying that the evaluation of work measurement in terms of the tasks and step by step given the science teacher and the arts teacher, they're not the same. By the time the government arrived at this differentiated payment rates, it had to go through a lot of scientific and non-scientific measures of tasks technically to arrive at that. And two, it's a trend globally. Actually, science products in terms of graduates in market.
Schools.
Yes, but what is the market? A market includes schools and not schools. It is the same. And we're losing teachers to brain drain because of that. So I think, and also as a country, if we are to develop STEM, that is science, technology, engineering, and mathematics skills, we must have a kind of motivation, which is very necessary. And I think that it is very, very important. And that's why some science courses like engineering, like medicine, take much more time. You can
even law takes time as the same time as engineering.
Degrees, BSc from Makerere, but those products from Makerere don't attract the same pay. They don't. And Tom, Dick, and Harry knows this. They don't get the same pay. So just like it is in the general market, so is here to make sure that we can attract and even motivate science education, technology education, engineering education, mathematics education. That's how we can lay the foundation for transformation through STEM in this country. And I can tell you that the decision of government was based on scientific evaluation.
I'm going to come to you, but let's hear from Mr. Mike Waboneka first.
So thank you so much. I think for me, one of the things is that the foundation, we need to not forget it. Now, Article 31 is that, 32 is that everyone has a right to education. Now, who are the actors? And we've been raising these issues in the education advocacy we've been making, including asking the minister to reduce school fees and all these exorbitant charges and things. You can imagine in this country, people still have to take runs, regs, paint, all that as requirements. And the minister is bricks. And the minister is happy. She's pretending of the Minister of Education. Now, I saw two important things. These are placards, and really these were speaking. Someone wrote, a retired teacher gets 2 million. The art teacher who is teaching gets 800,000. Is that reasonable? That the retired teacher is getting 2 million, and the one who is teaching is getting 800,000. And then they wrote another one. The Prime Minister, the President, the Speaker, even the Minister of Education, they all said the arts. They think about us. Is it a must?
Finance. No, the problem is that they failed sciences and they think they are so complicated.
So I think that for me, in terms of segregation, and this is where we're going to have a problem.
You may have to substantiate that.
Yes. There must be standards we follow. Let me give you an example. The state attorneys under the Attorney General's office, they tax for their salaries. The state attorneys in DPP's office, they don't. And we're still having that clash. They are doing the same work, just in different offices. And we've been saying that that is also discriminatory. Why are these ones paying taxes and these ones are not paying taxes? So if we must, because they're doing the same work, they're all state attorneys. They all go to law school. All you need is to pass the bar course and you're deployed. So these issues are not even isolated. So it's the same argument. So are we going to, for example, if the state attorney in the attorney general's chambers lay down their tools, are you going to simply say, go home? It is an issue.
All right. Yeah. Sarah, you wanted to give us some piece of information very quickly.
Yes, actually some of the information I've given, but what I want to say is that people who fail sciences have a tendency to think that sciences are more complicated and you need an extra effort than arts. And most of this argument of discrimination, they use their personal experiences because they failed sciences. Imagine that it's something complicated. I have done subjects at A level, including mathematics. Teachers teach for the same number of hours. So what do you consider? Is the qualification? Are you all degree holders or diploma holders? Do you teach the same number of hours per week or not? And that's why remuneration should be best. But say that this subject is complicated to teach. People are using their personal experiences to make such decisions that discriminate against arts teachers.
All right. Kenneth, I wanted to conclude on something, if you may. So I want to say that this dismissive approach of government does not work. You cannot stand on national television and say, if you don't go back to work, we'll get others. If you ask that person with that statement, that can you show us the alternative plan? Whom have you contacted to be on standby? At the time here, they said we are going to bring Cuban doctors.
Well, the minister said there are people have been volunteering in city schools. They will be deployed.
So they want volunteers to determine the future of our children. These guys, as Sarah said before, if there is nonsense was applying in the 60s, some of these guys would not have been known beyond Barar or Mbare.
So, and also the ministry is not seeing the implication. The teachers are saying we shall not even submit the results for the progressive assessment to UNEV. So what is going to happen to the children of the voters who think that these governments give them education? And what's going to happen to the assessment? Because this probably the person who is speaking for the ministry does not take their children to one of the schools.
No, they need that. Outside the
she actually said children of the poor who are going to suffer. That's correct.
Of course, children who are suffering and using our stolen money.
Minister, you're okay to have the children of the poor
discriminated
of your failure of your own policy. That should not be acceptable. And actually, by the way, that's a human rights issue. So the government of Uganda is failing to ensure that the right to education to children is being attained. And by the way, this issue can culminate even to the international regional bodies, even international, on the rights of the child and the right of education. There are many things involved. You can't just stand on national television and say, if you don't go back, we'll get us. That dismissive approach, lack of intellectual, emotional intelligence. These teachers, all they need is some support. More is intern doctors. What is wrong with this Ministry of Education? It is either intern doctors, which is definitely they are studying, or it is science teachers and arts teachers.
We have excess money to bribe MPs and other people.
Exactly.
Do you mind in that? Yeah. Just a quick one, if you don't mind. Seconds. I actually don't know how many countries around the world, how this sensical policy of giving specialist attention to science teachers. If you think about all developed countries, and we think about all developing countries, and Simon and I are substantially troubled. You know what, Ken? No. Uganda is in this unique league. Uganda is in a unique league that I actually don't know who are the real leaders politically driving education in this country, and the real leaders who are driving education policy in this country.
All right. We need to shift our gears very quickly.
No. I want to say
but we need to move on and discuss what is happening in Nairobi, in Kenya. And I want to begin with you, Honorable Mlongo, very quickly in a few minutes because we're running out of time. The situation in Nairobi, the demonstrations that are going on, how do you see them? How do you see that situation actually ending in that country?
But less than 1 minute, I must say that even in UK, in US, in France, in Germany, they pay science teachers higher allowances.
By what ratio?
And they give them
By what
bonus. Yes, quite a big one.
What's the disparity?
It's almost double. And the digits are more than double. If you look at it, I have some numbers here, and it's because I don't have time. But yeah, friends, because I'm looking at Manchester Academy. That's the same in US. Some of
What's the difference?
Public school.
What's the difference?
Imagine.
yeah.
Imagine.
Yes, but they have, for example, this one is 2,500 and the other one earns actually 5,000. These are dollars. These are differences. It's a Houston. And yeah, but now we'll go to Kenya. I'll share with you that information. In Kenya, yes, what stemmed initially was austerity measures, which were imposed by the IMF. And which fellows were there hovering around in the State House corridors, and even sitting in the strangers' gallery, watching over the proceedings. To make sure the IMF gets its cut in terms of repayment. And that escalated the cost of living and so on, attracting higher burden of succession and all this. That led to the initial protests. But because people, whereas it ended, there's a hangover of that because people still remained opposed to President Ruto and his government. They thought they're not done, they're not yet done. So anything that happens next will just be a trigger of something that was in the offing. And this recent one, of course, is because of the disappearance of a number of protesters and some kids being killed. The figure was about killing one of the young people. To me, my interest goes to how they're expressing their grievances and destruction of property, destroying government institutions like courts. police stations, even managing to grab guns of police and shooting them. And one of the listeners argued that Kenya does not deploy military. They did deploy this time around. They deployed military police. They also deployed police. And these people, the police and paramilitary, got completely overwhelmed and had to deploy the military. And as yes, Kenya situations, for them to express their grievances, that correct. People like anywhere, even in Uganda, should be free to express their grievances. But in what manner are they doing it is what they're interesting. But if you're going to use the destruction, wanton destruction of property, and also overwhelming and disrespecting the police, who are actually even very, very good in Kenya. They have not harassed or even not people at people directly. To me, that is an overreaction, and so they deserve to be handled. Much more strongly to protect even themselves who are protesting and the property and rights of the rest of the Kenyans and the government. Joseph, the slogan there is Ruto must go.
In a democracy, that is allowed. Can be anything. And in part, as Simon says, if the citizens believe that the leader in question is not doing the right job, they can do that. Number two, protests. They can happen one day after an elected leader has got the mandate, and citizens feel grievous about a particular issue. They go ahead and do it, except you don't do a lot of it here in Uganda, of course, particularly in Kampala. should not be allowed, and that's what Simon is not saying. But that's, you did.
Yes, the person is very strong and he killed so many people, including Mwangi.
I think someone you want to divert us on the. There's 1966 is not